I think the cowards are many of the people that stormed the Capitol that day that were claiming hang Mike Pence and believed in the big lie that the election was stolen, which it wasn't.
So I don't think that Officer Fanone, or I don't know what happened with Officer Dunn that day. Honestly, I can't comment on that. But what happened to him shouldn't have happened. I'll tell you that straight up. That shouldn't have happened.
Agree.
Right? So I go back to what I said. My issues with Fanone and Dunn were what happened after the fact at my trial.
So I want to ask you about Michael Fanone, Officer Michael Fanone, because this is a video that went viral a few weeks ago, several weeks ago, where you're following him in the hotel and you guys are yelling at one another, and you had some friends that were with you that recorded it, and right-wing members of the media. So tell me why you did that. And I guess specifically, what is your issue with Officer Fanone?
Okay, so my issue comes in specifically with Officer Fanone and Officer Dunn. And they're more personal issues than I have issues with Capitol Police officers, and I'll get into that now. I think we touched on that on our conversation. They weren't part of my trial, right? But they both sat in for my trial multiple times. And specifically, Officer Dunn sat at my trial just a couple feet away from my mother, right? And while they sentenced me to 22 years, my mom took it very hard. Obviously, it's her son. No matter what anybody thinks, the love of a mother to their son is eternal. While my mom was sobbing, Officer Dunn laughed. So obviously I feel some type of way towards him. Officer Fanone did something similar where he made a comment towards my mother during our trial. Again, they weren't part of my case, but to me, it was a little bit more personal when it came.
Okay, so Enrique, your mother didn't do anything wrong, so I don't agree with anybody that had made some comments to your mom. I'm with you there. But if I play devil's advocate for a moment, Officer Fanone got a traumatic brain injury. I know you've said on the record you do not condone violence.
Yes.
Can you understand? While I don't condone anybody talking to your mom, I think that's inappropriate because your mom didn't do anything wrong. Can you understand their side of Fanone almost died? I know you didn't beat him, but there were people that did. He was inches from his life. He had a heart attack. He traumatic brain injury. Can you understand their anger and frustration at you and others that stormed the Capitol that day? Because, like I said, he was beaten almost to death. Can you get that side of it?
So I'm going to give you my take just in general, and then specifically with the officers that were there at the Capitol that day.
Okay.
I think that a lot of those officers came in the morning not expecting what happened that day. And under no circumstances can I condone anybody putting their hands on these police officers, right? In general, this also includes Officer Dunn and Officer Fanone. That being said, like everything, you got to look at it case by case. There was a lot of officers that day that fired into the crowd without it being necessary. I've been in the security industry. I was a contractor for the DoD for many years. I've gone through these trainings. And what I saw that day on some occasions with these police officers is that they did either fire into the crowd or swing batons. So I could tell you that some of the rioters for putting their hands on police officers were wrong for doing that, right? And I could also say some of these police officers, what they did is I honestly believe, and through the testimony of my trial, through multiple police officers, I do believe that there were some bad apples there in the Capitol Police also. So it's not like I'm straight like F the police, or I'm not pro law enforcement when it came to certain aspects. Or
Enrique, but I'm sorry to interrupt, but Enrique, Fanone was not found to have done anything wrong that day. Let's focus on these two officers, Dunn and Fanone. I can't speak to others right now, but let's try to focus to them. Again, Fanone was beaten. He didn't do anything wrong that day, as you would probably agree with me, as you just said. He woke up that day not knowing that was going to happen. Look at the trauma that he went with his body. I don't condone him talking to your mom, but at the same time, why follow him in a hotel and call him a coward? I don't think Officer Fanone is a coward. I don't think Officer Dunn is a coward. I think the cowards are many of the people that stormed the Capitol that day that were claiming hang Mike Pence and believed in the big lie that the election was stolen, which it wasn't.
Mhm. So I don't think that Officer Fanone, or I don't know what happened with Officer Dunn that day.
Mhm.
Honestly, I can't comment on that. But
Okay.
what happened to him shouldn't have happened. I'll tell you that straight up. That shouldn't have happened. Right.
Agree.
So I go back to what I said. My issues with Fanone and Dunn were what happened after the fact at my
Mhm.
trial. Other people might have different views
Mhm.
on Officer Fanone and
What do you think is more serious though? Somebody that laughs at your mom, which I don't condone,
yeah.
or somebody that's beaten almost to death because a bunch of mobsters thought that the election was stolen? What do you think is more serious?
I think at this point, I'm not binary. I can't, I put things into compartments when I think
Mhm.
of things, I put things into compartments, right? And I
Mhm.
could say, hey, that shouldn't have happened, but for doing what you did after the
All
fact,
right, let me
you,
ask you another, let me try to phrase this a different way, Enrique. Do you have a I don't even know your family situation. Do you have kids?
yes, I do.
Okay, I don't wanna get personal, but there's a reason why I asked that question. Let's just say, hypothetically speaking, I don't know, somebody was driving drunk, and God forbid, I would never want this to happen, but one of your family members was injured because of a drunk driver. And
Mhm,
then you're in court and you're a few feet away from that drunk driver's family. Let's just say, God forbid, I would never want this to happen, but one of your kids was paralyzed, for example.
mhm.
And then somebody was convicted who did this to a member of your family. Wouldn't you feel a little bit of relief? And I don't want to use the term joy, but if somebody was convicted of harming a member of your family, wouldn't you have a smile on your face, at least knowing that justice was served? I know you disagree with the way you were charged and the way you were convicted. Enrique, I get that. But do you understand the correlation? These people, they were harmed physically, and I don't speak for them, but I'm sure they would agree that they were happy that they felt like justice was served with you because they feel like you were the leader of the pack. Am I making sense?
Well, here's the thing. In that theoretical situation, you're 100% right, right? I still wouldn't condone doing that to somebody, and I wouldn't do that to somebody, right?
Right.
But that's not what happened. Anybody who, and I'm 100% sure because they sat through my trial, and I'm sure that they saw everything that happened there at that trial, right?
Hmm.
I wasn't responsible for what they happened to them. I wasn't the ringleader for what happened to them. A member, I got convicted, and we lost that trial on day one, right?
Hmm.
We lost that trial because of a biased jury. It took us a month to pick the jury. Every Regardless of our feelings towards the Black Lives Matter movement, most of the people that were in, actually, I'd say -1, were huge supporters of the BLM movement there in DC. Not a single one was conservative. Not a single one ever voted for a Republican. This was a political trial. I don't think that we'd be having this conversation that we're having now if it would have just simply been moved. The venue would have been moved, like, let's say, Virginia or Maryland or South Florida or
Okay,
something like
I
that.
understand that
So,
you feel like you
so
had an unfair trial. I get that, Enrique.
but anybody
But
that watched that trial can say that, right? If you
well,
kept up with that trial, you'd be able to see right through the
But that
BS.
wouldn't have happened if Donald Trump didn't say the election was stolen and people like you didn't believe it. January 6th wouldn't have happened. Can we agree on that? If Trump didn't say that the Democrats cheated and Joe Biden cheated, would January 6th have happened, Enrique?
I think that the pressure, right? Here's my problem with that, with the whole Donald Trump. If Donald Trump wouldn't have said that the election was stolen, that
Hmm.
that wouldn't have happened. If we go back to 2016, and that's where I think this begun, what happened on January 6th, when Hillary Clinton called Trump supporters a basket of deplorables, we
Hmm.
were deplatformed, demonetized. I was personally debanked. Our social media platforms were taken. Our voice was taken. The COVID lockdowns, right? The summer of love, where we had these BLM riots across the country. I think it was a powder keg, right, waiting to go off.